Liberty Ledger, where freedom meets the facts. Truth, uncompromised. America first.
My mom always told me, never waste your breath on someone who actually buys into their own BS. But sometimes, Congresswoman, you just have to make an exception, especially when those tall tales are costing American taxpayers millions. Vice President J.D. Vance sat perfectly still in the presiding chair, his rigid Marine posture never wavering despite the absolute chaos breaking out around him. The Senate floor had never witnessed anything quite like this before. A joint oversight hearing on border policy was on the verge of becoming the most watched political moment of the last 10 years. Representative Ilhan Omar stood at the witness podium, jabbing her finger toward Vance like she was holding a weapon. She'd shown up expecting a routine gig, a chance to slam GOP immigration plans and snag some viral clips for her social media. Instead, she walked right into an ambush she never saw coming. "You sit there in that expensive suit, Mr. Vice President, acting like you actually care about immigrants," Omar started, her voice dripping with pure spite. "But we all know exactly who you are. You're a white nationalist sympathizer who made a career out of attacking people who look just like me. You wrote an entire book blaming the poor for their own struggles while you climbed the ladder and kicked it away behind you." The gallery started buzzing at her words. This was the exact Ilhan Omar her fans absolutely lived for. Tough, unapologetic, and ready to take the elites to task. And she was only just getting warmed up. You go after refugees. You target Muslims. You take shots at anyone who doesn't fit your personal idea of what an American should look like. She took a beat for effect, staring straight into the C-SPAN cameras. And yet, here you are, having the nerve to run a hearing on immigration. The hypocrisy is unbelievable, but honestly, it's not surprising at all. All through her ranting, Vance did something that clearly started to get under her skin. He didn't flinch, didn't cut her off, and didn't even try to defend himself. He just sat there, occasionally scribbling a few notes on a yellow pad. His face was a total blank, looking almost like he was bored. It was the same tactic he'd mastered while questioning detainees back in Iraq. Let them keep talking. Let them dig themselves in. Let them tie their own noose with their own words. When Omar finally stopped to breathe, clearly waiting for him to snap at the bait, Vance glanced up from his notepad with a look of slight curiosity. "Are you quite finished, Congresswoman?" That question, delivered in his calm Appalachian drawl, seemed to knock her completely off balance. She'd been bracing for anger and defensiveness, maybe a shouting match that would make her look like a hero fighting the system. Instead, she was met with this cool, calculated, and almost pitying response. Yes, I've made my point," she stammered, suddenly losing her nerve. "Excellent," Vance said, putting his pen down and lacing his fingers together, "because I'd like to have a little chat about your finances." All the color instantly vanished from Omar's face. What happened next would go down in history as the great C-SPAN meltdown. 47 minutes that torched a political career and sparked a million memes. Vance reached for a file on his desk, moving with the slow, steady patience of a man who knew exactly how this ended. He flipped it open casually, like he was just checking out a dinner menu. "Before we get into border policy," he began, "I want to congratulate you on your thriving small business, Representative Omar. Seriously, it's the American dream in the flesh." Omar's eyes went thin. "What on earth are you talking about?" "The E Street Group." Vance looked up with a look of fake, over-the-top respect. "Your husband's consulting shop. It's seen some pretty incredible growth over the last few years. Truly impressive stuff." My husband is a seasoned pro in the political consulting world. There is absolutely nothing weird about $2.8 million. Vance lifted a single sheet of paper. That is exactly how much your own campaign has funneled to your husband's firm since 2019. $2.8 million in consulting fees, travel bills, and a whole list of other services. He let that figure linger in the air for a second before moving on. Now look, I'm just a simple guy from the hills of Ohio, representative. I didn't grow up going to elite schools. I mean, I did go to Yale, but I was there on a scholarship, and everyone made sure I knew I didn't fit in. A ripple of laughter came from the gallery. But even I can tell that $2.8 million is a heck of a lot of consulting work. Omar sat up stiff in her seat, her jaw clamping shut. Tim is a highly respected expert in his line of work. He was working campaigns long before he ever met me. This is nothing but a racist hit job on my family, and I won't stand for— Vance's eyebrows shot up just a bit. Congresswoman, I haven't said a single word about your race. I haven't brought up your religion either. All I've done is point out a specific dollar amount and a business name. Those are just cold, hard facts and figures. Unless we're saying that math is racist now. You know perfectly well what you're trying to do. Omar snapped. You're trying to smear me because I'm a black Muslim woman who— Actually, I'm just trying to wrap my head around why your campaign was cutting checks to your husband's firm for over $100,000 a month. That feels like a pretty fair question for a public servant to have to answer. Vance slid another paper out of the folder. Let's take a look at how this timeline actually stacks up. When Tim Meehan first started working for your campaign, he was still married to someone else. Not long after, rumors of an affair began to circulate. Eventually, his wife filed for divorce, explicitly naming his relationship with you as the cause. And then you two got married. At that moment, Vance let his fingers slide down the page. Payments to Minet's company suddenly skyrocketed by 400%. The entire room went stone quiet. Even Omar's allies on the Democratic side looked like they were holding their breath. Now, I'm not here to be anyone's marriage counselor, Vance continued, his voice sounding almost gentle. Whatever happens between two consenting adults is strictly their own business. But when campaign funds, money donated by everyday Americans who believed in your message, start flowing to your spouse's firm at rates that would make a Wall Street banker blush, that becomes everyone's business. Omar's grip tightened on the edges of the podium. The FEC has already gone over our filings. Everything is completely legal and transparent. Legal and transparent, he repeated. Vance gave a slow, deliberate nod. Back in Middletown, Ohio, where I grew up, we had a saying. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Plenty of things are legal that would still make your grandmother ashamed of you. He closed the folder with a sharp, quiet snap. Representative Omar, where I'm from, when you funnel millions from your campaign into your husband's pocket, we don't call that consulting. We call it exactly what it is. And the FEC actually has a different word for it, too. They just haven't decided to use it yet. Omar opened her mouth to snap back, but Vance was already reaching for a second folder. But let's move on. I'd like to talk about a specific historical event, something that took place back in 2001. I'm sure you remember it well, though perhaps a bit differently than most Americans do. If you wanted to see what happened when he brought up September 11th, hit that subscribe button right now. This second folder was noticeably thicker than the first one. Vance handled it with a certain kind of reverence, as if it held something precious or incredibly painful. September 11th, 2001, he began. I was 17 years old, living with my grandmother, my mama, in a house that didn't always have running water. We watched the towers fall on an old TV set that barely caught 3 channels on a good day. His voice had shifted. It was softer now, but there was a hard, steely edge hiding beneath the surface. 2 weeks later, I walked into a Marine Corps recruiting office. And I wasn't the only one. Thousands of young men and women from towns and families just like mine did the same. We were all thinking the exact same thing. Someone had attacked our country, and we were going to go do something about it. He looked up and locked eyes with Omar. I served my time in Iraq. I had friends who never made it back home. I had friends who came home in flag-draped boxes. I had friends who made it back, but left pieces of themselves in that sand, pieces they'll never be able to get back. Omar shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She could see exactly where this was going, but there was absolutely nowhere to hide. So you can imagine my curiosity, Representative, when I heard your remarks at the Council on American-Islamic Relations banquet in 2019. Vance pulled a transcript out of the folder. You were discussing the aftermath of September 11th and the discrimination faced by Muslim Americans. That's a legitimate topic, and an important one. But then you said this. He read the words directly from the page. His voice was completely flat. KR was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. Vance set the paper back down. Some people did something. He let those words linger in the heavy silence. Representative Omar, I need you to help me understand something. Because where I'm from, the words we choose actually matter. When we talk about Pearl Harbor, we don't just say some people did something. When we talk about the Oklahoma City bombing, we don't say some people did something. But when it comes to the deadliest terrorist attack in American history, an attack carried out by Islamic extremists who murdered 2,977 innocent people, including parents, children, and first responders who ran into buildings they knew might collapse. When it comes to that tragedy, you chose the words, some people did something. You are taking my words completely out of context. Omar's voice rose sharply in the chamber. I was making a point about civil liberties and how Muslim Americans were. I am reading your exact words back to you, Representative. There is no context in the world that makes some people did something an appropriate way to describe September 11th. Vance leaned in closer. Unless you truly believe it was something less than what it was, unless you believe those 3,000 Americans were just acceptable losses or collateral damage in some larger geopolitical grudge. That is absolutely disgusting, Omar shouted. Now you're twisting my words to paint me as some kind of terrorist sympathizer. This is nothing but pure and simple Islamophobia. I haven't mentioned Islam once, Representative. I have simply quoted your own words regarding a terrorist attack. Vance's voice stayed steady, which only seemed to make her even angrier. You're the one who constantly brings up your faith, almost like you're trying to hide behind it every time someone asks you a tough question. I've faced death threats because of people exactly like you. Omar pointed her finger sharply at him. People who use their influence to fan the flames of hatred against Muslims. You have blood on your hands. Vance waited until she was finished before speaking in a low, quiet tone. I lost close friends because of the tragedy of September 11th. These were real people with names and lives who never got to go home to their families. And you dismissed their ultimate sacrifice and the lives lost in those towers as just some people did something. He tucked the transcript back into the folder. In the Marines, we live by a simple rule: never forget. To us, those aren't just empty words. It's a solemn promise we made to the brothers we lost. You clearly have a different philosophy, Representative, and I believe the American public deserves to know what it is. Omar's breath was heavy now as her composure started to slip. But Vance was already reaching for the next set of papers. But wait, I'd actually like to talk about your views on Israel and the American Jewish community. I have a few tweets here that I think the audience will find quite revealing. Make sure to share this with someone who needs to see what happened next. Vance pulled out his phone with a sense of theatrical ease. I don't typically bring props to Senate hearings, he remarked while scrolling through the screen, but I felt it was important to read this straight from the source. I wouldn't want anyone claiming I'm taking things out of context yet again. Omar's face had set into a mask of pure, controlled rage. She knew exactly what was coming. Everyone in the room knew exactly what was coming. February 10th, 2019. Vance began reading from the screen. A journalist asked for your take on why Republicans support Israel, and you replied publicly on Twitter for the entire world to see with these specific words. He held the phone up like a prosecutor showing evidence to a jury. It's all about the Benjamins, baby. A low murmur spread through the gallery. Now, for anyone who might not know the slang, Benjamins refers to $100 bills because Benjamin Franklin's face is on them. So, when the topic of Israel came up, your gut reaction was to bring up money, specifically Jewish money, given the context. I apologized for that post, Omar interjected quickly. My Democratic colleagues pointed out why it was so offensive, and You apologized? Yes? Let's talk about those apologies of yours. Vance set the phone down and grabbed another paper because here's what's so fascinating about your pattern, Representative. You make a statement that's clearly anti-Semitic. People get outraged. You offer an apology, and then you turn around and do the exact same thing. He started reading from a timeline starting in 2012. You tweeted that Israel had hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. The idea of the hypnotizing Jew is a trope that has existed for centuries. Representative, that was a staple of Nazi propaganda. I was simply criticizing the policies of the Israeli government. Not 2019? All about the Benjamins. The classic trope of the money-grubbing Jew pulling the strings of politicians. Another old favorite. And then later in 2019, you suggested that American Jews hold a dual loyalty to Israel. The dual loyalty lie. Another one of anti-Semitism's greatest hits. The Nazis were big fans of that one too. You're actually comparing me to the Nazis. Omar's voice shook with indignation. I am a refugee. I escaped persecution. How dare you say that to me? I am simply comparing your choice of words to historical anti-Semitic tropes, Representative. The comparison speaks for itself. Vance raised a hand to cut off her interruption. But here is the part that I find truly interesting. After every single incident, you issued an apology. Your party's leadership put out statements condemning anti-Semitism. The House even passed a resolution specifically sparked by your own comments. He leaned back in his chair. And yet, you just kept doing it, over and over again. Apologize, repeat, apology, repeat. Do you know what my mother would call someone who keeps saying sorry for the same exact behavior? He went silent for a moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice echoed through the quiet chamber. She'd say, That person isn't sorry. They're just sorry they got caught. Omar stood up abruptly, pointing her finger at Vance like a weapon. This is nothing but a coordinated attack, she yelled. You and your white nationalist friends are trying to silence a black Muslim woman just because I have the courage to criticize Israel. I will not be bullied. I will not be silenced. Representative, please take your seat, Vance said with total composure. You aren't being silenced. You're being quoted. There is a massive difference. You sit there in your position of privilege, lecturing me about anti-Semitism, while my own grandmother, unlike those in your party, survived poverty that would break most people. My mother fought a battle with addiction while I was forced to raise myself. I served my country in a combat zone while you were busy tweeting anti-Semitic conspiracies. Vance's voice stayed level, but there was a cold edge to it now. Don't try to lecture me about privilege, Representative. I've worked for every single thing I've got. The real question is whether you can honestly say the same. He snapped the folder shut. But we aren't finished quite yet. I want to talk about your immigration history. The refugee narrative you've built your entire political career on. Because I have some questions that you've never actually answered. Like and share if you feel like the next part changed the entire game. The chamber had fallen deathly silent. Even the typical hum of aides whispering in the back had completely stopped. Everyone could sense that something massive had just shifted. Vance's tone took a sharp turn. The relatable warmth and the occasional humor were gone, replaced by something much more intense. This was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. Representative Omar, you have crafted your entire political brand around one very powerful story. You're the Somali refugee who made it to America, survived the camps, achieved the American dream, and now serves in Congress. It's a moving narrative, the kind of story that truly shows what makes this country special. He took a long pause. If it's actually true, he said, as the color drained from Omar's face. Back in 2009, you wed Ahmed Hersi in what you called a traditional Muslim ceremony, a religious union rather than a legal one. The two of you had 2 children together. Then in 2009, you legally married a British citizen named Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmeh, who entered the United States. And yet, according to your own statements, you had 0 contact with him while you were legally his wife. Vance started pulling out documents, setting them down one by one with precision. In 2011 and 2017, you filed your taxes jointly with Ahmed Hersi as your husband, even though you were still legally married to Ahmed Elmeh during some of those years. He glanced up from the papers. That isn't just a matter of opinion, Representative. We're talking about either fraud or perjury, depending on exactly which government forms you chose to lie on. These conspiracy theories were debunked long ago, Omar yelled back. However, there was a clear note of desperation in her voice now. This is just racist trash being pushed by the right wing. Then answer these questions under oath. Vance's voice sliced right through her, shouting, I'll even swear you in right here, right now. Give us an answer under the penalty of perjury. Is Ahmed Elmeh actually your brother? There was nothing but silence. It is a very straightforward question, Representative. You have been asked this dozens of times before. You have never once given a direct answer. You have labeled it as racist. You've called it Islamophobic. You have dismissed it as a conspiracy theory. But not once have you simply said no. Omar's mouth hung open, but she couldn't find the words. Here is what we know for a fact. Vance reached for another piece of paper. Ahmed Elmeh's social media posts repeatedly identified your father as his own father, People who were in college with him were under the firm impression that he was your brother. The immigration records show some very strange patterns, and you haven't once offered a simple denial while under oath. He set down the document. I truly believe in immigration, Representative, the legal kind. My wife's own family arrived in this country using the correct legal channels. They were patient, and they waited. They filled out every single form required. They played strictly by the rules. Millions of other refugees, including thousands from your home country of Somalia, have done exactly that. They sat in camps for years, or even decades, just hoping for their shot at the American dream. Vance stood up, and that simple movement seemed to command the entire room. If these claims are true, and your refusal to address them under oath tells us everything, then you did more than just break the law. You actually cut in line. You stepped ahead of thousands of Somali refugees who were trying to do things the honest way. These are people from your very own community. These are the people who put their trust in you to be their voice. He walked slowly toward the edge of the platform. His voice projected clearly across the entire chamber. I grew up in poverty, Representative. I'm talking about real poverty. Not the we need to cut back on spending kind of poor. I mean the we might not have a meal today kind of poor. I know exactly what it feels like to have absolutely nothing to your name. I also know what it takes to earn everything you have by doing it the hard way. No shortcuts, no gaming the system. Just hard work, sacrifice, and following every rule. He came to a stop, looking Omar right in the eye. You want to give America a lecture on immigration, while the massive questions about your own history remain ignored. You want to lecture us on corruption, while you're funneling millions into your husband's firm. You want to talk to us about bigotry, while you're busy tweeting out anti-Semitic tropes. You want to lecture us about 9/11 after you dismissed the attacks as just some people doing something. His voice fell to a near whisper, but somehow it managed to echo through the entire room. Representative Omar, you are not a progressive champion. You aren't a real voice for refugees. You are not a defender of the marginalized. You are a fraud. And the most heartbreaking part, the part that really should keep you up at night, is that the Somali community put their faith in you, viewing you as their voice and living proof that their struggles actually mattered. Out of everyone, they are the ones you've let down the most. The room went dead silent. Then Omar just snapped. Calling him a racist and an Islamophobe, she snatched her papers and hurled them at Vance, sending pages flying across the chamber floor. You are not going to silence me. You will not silence my voice. This is exactly what white supremacy looks like. This is what happens when a black Muslim woman finally dares to speak truth to power. She marched toward the exit, then spun back around with her face twisted in pure anger. The people see right through you. Everyone knows exactly what you are. History is going to remember you as a fascist, and me as a fighter for freedom. Security stepped in to stop her as she kept on shouting. The cameras didn't miss a single second. They caught the papers on the floor, the finger pointing, the tears of anger on her face, and her fellow Democrats staring at their shoes, unwilling to look her in the eye or stand up for her. AOC just sat there like a statue, staring blankly ahead. Rashida Tlaib sat with her head buried in her hands. Not one member of the squad stood up to defend her. While security led a shouting Omar out of the room, Vance simply walked back to his chair and took a seat. He grabbed his pen, jotted something down on his legal pad, and looked back up at the rest of the witnesses. "Can we move on?" he asked calmly. I think we were right in the middle of talking about immigration policy. That video racked up 80 million views in just 2 days. By the end of day one, Omar Meltdown was trending in 37 different countries. The clip of her tossing papers and yelling about white supremacy became an overnight meme, remixed with everything from cartoon sound bites to epic movie soundtracks. Conservative news outlets played the footage on a non-stop loop. Liberal media first tried to spin it as Vance provoking her with a racist attack. But they quietly buried the story as the full, unedited clip went viral everywhere. The entire 47-minute video told a story that no amount of PR could fix. A calm, fact-based presentation of evidence met with total hysteria and an absolute emotional breakdown. Even her supporters had a hard time defending how bad it looked. Within a week, the FEC announced they were launching a formal investigation into the E Street Group payments. 3 Democratic senators put out very careful statements about campaign finance transparency, making sure not to mention Omar by name. The leadership of her own party went completely quiet. There was no defense and no criticism, just a total, awkward lack of support. But the immigration questions turned out to be even more damaging. An investigative reporter who'd been tracking the Elmi story for years dropped a massive report right after the hearing, noting that Omar's refusal to talk under oath gave the case a whole new life. Officials in Minnesota announced they were now digging into certain state filings. However, the reaction from the Somali American community was what really hurt the most. Leaders in Minneapolis held a press conference right outside a local mosque. "We are proud to be refugees," said an elder who spent 11 years in a Kenyan camp before coming to Minnesota. "We came to this country the right way. We followed all the rules. If Representative Omar didn't do the same, then she doesn't speak for us. She only speaks for herself." Then, a young first-generation Somali-American college student went viral with her own video response. "My parents waited 8 years," she said, with tears rolling down her cheeks. They spent 8 years in a refugee camp with absolutely nothing because they believed in following the law. And now I'm finding out that the woman meant to represent us might have cheated and cut the line while my parents were out there suffering. How am I even supposed to feel about that? The squad's lack of a real response started making its own headlines. AOC eventually put out a short statement. "I support Ilhan and believe in due process for everyone. But I also believe public officials should answer fair questions about what they've done." It was about as weak a defense as you could imagine. In plain English, she was basically saying, "You're on your own, Ilhan." Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley didn't say anything at all. At first, Omar tried to stay defiant. "I won't let white supremacist attacks shut me down," she posted on Twitter. "The forces of hate want to ruin me because I'm willing to speak the truth. I'm never going to stop fighting for my community." But then, the tweets started to dry up. Her press conferences were suddenly called off. Every public appearance vanished from her schedule. Her office finally put out a note saying she was focusing on local issues while she figured out what to do next. Just 2 weeks after the hearing, a new poll showed her approval rating in Minnesota's 5th District had plummeted by 23 points. A primary challenger, a young Somali-American businessman who arrived in the U.S. legally as a child refugee, officially announced his candidacy. His launch video featured one simple message: "I'm running because Minnesota deserves a representative who actually answers questions instead of throwing tantrums." 3 weeks after the hearing, Vance appeared on a podcast for his first long-form interview since the viral confrontation. "I didn't enjoy that at all," he said when asked about the moment that went viral. "Nobody should take pleasure in watching someone self-destruct. I grew up around people who self-destructed. My mother, my family, and my friends. There's nothing fun about it. He paused. He took a second to gather his thoughts. But the American people deserve the honest truth. They deserve representatives who are willing to answer questions. They deserve public servants who don't hide behind accusations of racism. Every time someone asks them to explain their finances or their past, it's not too much to ask. That's just the bare minimum. The host asked if he thought Omar would survive this politically. That's up to the people of Minnesota, Vance replied. But I'll say this, the Somali community in Minneapolis is full of remarkable people. These are people who survived wars, refugee camps, and unimaginable hardships. They came here with nothing and built their lives through pure hard work and sacrifice. They deserve a representative who honors that sacrifice, not someone who allegedly took shortcuts while they waited in line. The final image of the story came from Minneapolis. 3 weeks after the hearing, inside a small Somali restaurant in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, an old TV on the wall was playing the news. A group of elderly Somali men sat at a corner table, drinking tea and watching the coverage of Omar's primary challenger. One of them, a man who had spent 15 years in a refugee camp before finally reaching America, slowly shook his head. "We really believed in her," he said in his accented English. "We thought she was one of us, our voice, our success, and the proof that all our sacrifice was worth it." He took a sip of his tea, his weathered hands wrapped tightly around the cup. Now, I don't know what to believe, but I do know this. We came here the right way. We waited our turn. We suffered. We earned our place here." As he said, if she did not do the same, he didn't even finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Outside the restaurant, a billboard that once featured Omar's smiling face now displayed a simple message. Minnesota's 5th District deserves better. It was paid for by Somali Americans for accountability. If this story reminded you why accountability matters, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to see politicians answer real questions.